Thanks everybody for joining, and I know more people are going to be coming in. As you all know, we're in some pretty difficult times right now with this COVID-19, and in a few minutes I'm going to be introducing my esteemed guest here today, because I think I think we need a medical professional to answer questions today for people, for all you guys who are watching. But before we do that, let me just say a few things. All Americans right now are sacrificing. We're all living a life that I know I've never lived a life like this, and I know none of you have ever lived a life like this in America before, where we're basically, this social distancing, where we're living in our house most of the time. We can't go to work. For those of us, many of us have lost jobs. Many business owners, their businesses it's very difficult to keep businesses going right now. But the first thing I want to do is I want to start off with to thank. First, I want to start with our first responders, our nurses, our doctors, and we've got a doctor here today. Our nurses, our doctors, our law enforcement, our healthcare providers of all sorts, our first responders of all sorts. These folks, we've been hearing more and more about it on the TV, on the news, what they're facing, what they're going through, and we thank all of them, because in this day and age when, God forbid, somebody who's got this COVID-19, we're not going near that person. The doctors and nurses, they go towards the person to help them. People like us go the other way. These are our heroes, and we thank all of them, and just all of the great Americans who are sacrificing. So many people losing work, concerned about losing work, and then of course the moms and pops, the moms and dads whose kids are out of school. And I'm an empty nester. I can't even imagine what it would be like now if, when my kids were young, they were not in school, I was not at work, my wife wasn't at work, and we're all living together, having to teach the kids and do all that stuff. People are sacrificing tremendously, and I also thank our president very much. Our president and his stellar team, I believe, are doing a superb job. So with that said, I'm going to introduce my esteemed guest. This is Dr. Terry Schaack. Terry will tell you about his background. Terry's going to give you and answer questions and give you his thoughts from the standpoint of a treating physician, what treating physicians are facing. Somebody who, for example, is getting calls regularly from patients saying, Dr. Terry, I've got a runny nose. What does this mean? And you'll hear from Terry, and you'll be able to ask Terry questions, and we'll have Terry answer a bunch of those questions. And before I turn this over to Terry, and after Terry speaks, then I'm going to be talking about some other issues relating to the campaign. As you all know, we've now moved on to round 2 against somebody that I believe is one of the most evil politicians that we've ever seen, this guy Adam Schiff. He's a liar, he's a leaker, and he's suddenly gone completely underground. You don't hear from Mr. Schiff too much, which is probably a good thing, because hearing from that guy is enough to make me want to vomit sometimes. But I think he thinks he's going to lay low for a while, and somehow we're going to forget about what happened with the last few years with him. I'm not going to let him forget that. But thank God I beat 6 other people. There were 8 of us in this race. In the primary, I beat the other 6 folks. And it's going to be me versus Schiff now, one-on-one, mano a mano, in the November election. These are strange times. I can't go out and meet you in person like I normally like to, and speak in person and speak to groups of people and do all the things we do. So we're now doing these virtual fundraisers until we can all do that again. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Schaack for a while. And I'll tell you 2 cool things about Dr. Schaack. One, this man here was Ronald Reagan's personal treating physician after President Reagan left the White House. I had heard that the other day, and that totally blew me away, of course. And Ronald Reagan is my inspiration. I became a Republican because of Ronald Reagan. And then I just found out that Dr. Schaack, among others, was also Jimmy Stewart's treating physician. So who better to talk today? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Schaack, and then I'll come back in at some point. I might ask some questions of the doctor along the way too. But if you have questions, just type them out, and my deputy campaign manager, David Terpetrosian, who's in the back, you might hear his voice every now and then with a question or two.
Thank you, Eric, for inviting me to speak today and talk to a group of people. It is hard to speak to groups anymore, so you found a way to do it, and that's great.
And we're social distancing, right?
Yes, we are, which we need to do, and we'll talk about that. I wanted to take this opportunity to just share some thoughts I have. You were nice enough to introduce me as a treating physician. That's what I see myself as. I'm in my office 5 days a week. I do some other things, as we all do, to keep ourselves current and everything like that. But if I talk about things, I start talking about numbers, it's all numbers that I've looked at in order to be able to make a decision when I talk to somebody on the phone or in the office about what to do about the conditions they have. So these numbers are not meant to make policy on, because I'm not a policy guy. I'm a treating physician, as you said. And so we'd like to talk about that to start with, and say we do have a medical problem here, a big medical problem, but we have lots of big medical problems in this country, and most of them we handle pretty darn well. It's hard to know what to do when you got a new one. And I think the uncertainty scares people, but we do need to keep it in perspective. The influenza is probably the best thing to look at. And if you look back 2 years ago, influenza in the United States killed 60,000 people, many more people than have been killed by this virus. Maybe not as many as this virus will kill, but it killed a lot of people, 60,000. And not too many people got scared. We even had trouble vaccinating people. Only half the country vaccinated from an illness that killed 60,000. We all need to do better at doing the things we can do to take care of these illnesses. With Corona, one of the things that I thought about is I see patients who probably have had Corona. I personally have not had anybody test positive. Some of that's due to the lack of our ability to get testing. And I pulled every string I can get, and it's still very hard to get testing. But if you look at it, I said, why am I not seeing these hundreds of people that everybody else is? And part of it is, if you look at it, there's 60,000 physicians in California, and there's about 6,000 or 7,000, 8,000 cases. Now, more doctors get called in. There's several doctors seeing a patient, but then many patients see many doctors. But every doctor's not seeing lots and lots of these cases. Treating physicians like myself, as a board-certified internist and somebody who does general practice, probably seeing a few more than people in, the orthopedic surgeons are. But it's still not huge. It may get huge, and we got to be ready for it, but it probably isn't right now.
Yeah.
The other thing that's out there is treatment. We do have good resources. I mean, Southern California is probably blessed with resources. The state as a whole, a little bit less. But Southern California has a great medical backup system and has lots and lots of resources, both hospitals and physicians. We're very blessed in that regard. And so we probably will be able to handle this thing, especially if it comes out to be no more, but what it's looking like in the last few days or few weeks. It's the worst case scenarios that they talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago don't seem to be here. Bad, but not worst case. And I think that's important.
So you're saying what they were talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we haven't seen what they were predicting in terms of badness? The
modeling they were looking at, I'm not an epidemiologist, but you can look at the numbers that people are talking about. A couple weeks ago, people talked about 1 million to 2 or 3 million people dying. If you look at the numbers that were being thrown around a couple days ago by smart people, Tony Fauci, other people, they're talking about 100,000 to 200,000. It's a lot less than 1 million to 2 million. Yeah. Something's happened in there, probably a combination of things. This social distancing probably helps a lot. Better hand washing. I can tell you, I'm somebody who washes my hands all the time. I'm very fastidious about it. But now I count, or I do other things. I can't sing, so I'm saying, but I count and everything like that. I know I'm washing my hands now more because my hands are drier and I have to use more moisturizer. Those of us that thought we were doing a good job need to do a better job, and hopefully we are. Social distancing. you need to do that. Our particular office, we've always had a policy. If a employee has a fever, stay home. You will be paid for that day. Stay home, though. Do not come with the fever. We now actually take a temperature on everybody when they come in the office. I believe my employees, if they knew they had one, would stay home.
Yeah.
But it just reinforces them. We're taking this thing serious,
Yeah.
but we're not telling them to stay home. We have our offices open. I had a patient with kidney failure 2 days ago. Had a patient today call me with an issue about a respiratory illness that ended up not being Corona-19. We're quite sure. ER evaluation, CAT scan of the lung, not showing the things we'd see. But everybody thought, oh, it's Corona. But this guy's seriously ill. He's
But
in
you're
his
saying
70s.
it's not Corona?
It's not Corona in that particular case.
Yeah.
So we're going to see regular things, and we got to keep going with regular medicine. And I think most of the physicians I know are doing that, and that's critical. But we all have to be extra careful.
Right. So are you getting calls from people saying, Doc, my nose is running. Do I have, what do I do or something?
There's the same calls I got before, but now in the back, they won't mention because they don't want to sound like they're odd. What is it, Corona? That's what they're really asking, though. Now it's, I got a runny nose. What do you think I should do? And these are people that wouldn't normally call me with a runny nose, but now they are because they're concerned about this, and they should be. I want them calling me, and I talk to them. We talk about what we do know about it, what we don't know about it. Corona without fever is rare, probably. Corona without cough is probably rare, not zero. And so we have to ask them about these things that we have learned from the little bit of study that's out here, and they all ask about treatment. And the treatment issues are really even more difficult. The big paper that made a big splash, everybody's seen that chart that was published, that the hydroxychloroquine plus zithromycin, it went down to 0.
Yeah.
You got to realize that's 6 patients in that study. And out of that 6, they measured them on day 6, but the paper is actually going to be published. And I've seen the proof of it that's not yet published. One of those patients actually turned 7 on day 8.
What does that mean?
The testing, they kept testing the people, and that person who was negative at day 6 of treatment was positive on day 8. So although the graph looks nice, and if you just look at that, you get a sense that this hydroxychloroquine plus zithromycin is the end-all be-all. It's probably a major step forward. The people who did this, when you read the paper, these guys follow the regular guidelines.
Let me ask you this question. I'm not a doctor, right? So are you saying that there's a chance that this medicine you're just describing could have significant help?
Oh, I think the preliminary stuff is it looks very promising, but you're dealing with a very small study, which they didn't meet the power requirements of the study that they set out with. And if you just look at that one graph, you're not looking at what's in the whole paper. They freely admit they didn't recruit as many people as they wanted. They freely admit that the control and the treatment sides were not even.
Because everything's happening so quickly.
Right. And they also put in there, they published it because they needed to, and I think they should. And I think it's going to be a landmark paper. And I do believe that we really need to take these treatment options seriously.
Well, I agree with you. I hear the president speak, and I agree with the president. If you see somebody that's dying, that's really got this virus and is on their last legs, and unfortunately there are a number of people out there like that, what do these folks have to lose by trying this stuff? And apparently it's had some positive results for doing it. So
especially if you're looking at hydroxychloroquine, the study actually, 3 people in the study, 3 out of the 26 who were into the study, they were taken off the drug when they got they were taken out of the study when they got transferred to the ICU. So this treatment is really looking at people who are not the sickest, but who are sick and they become the sickest. But I do agree that fortunately the right to treat is out there now. I think that's a big deal. And I think that individual doctors need to look at these things and talk to people. We use drugs all the time outside of their FDA approved services. Their FDA approved or something like that.
Let me stop you there. What do you mean?
The FDA, once the FDA has approved a drug for one use, a licensed physician, I believe in all states, I know it's true in the states I've been licensed in, which include Ohio, Texas, and California, you can use that drug for other things. Okay, but it has to be at your discretion, and you're responsible for it.
Client obviously and the patient
The
obviously
patient has to be informed,
agree to it. Yeah.
and they have to be informed. So you can use these things, but we do it all. It's all called off-label use, and it's used all the time.
Yeah.
We use it forever. The use of Botox for migraines was originally off-label use, and it's a good use of the drug now. There's lots of things like that. So hydroxychloroquine, which I'm boarded in rheumatology as well, so I take care of people with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. I have one patient who's been on Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, for 22 years, and had not a single side effect from the drug. She has other issues, but she's not a single drug. 20 years on this drug.
Yeah.
And a lot of rheumatologists have had people on it for long periods of time. So not having the doctor and the patient have an option to evaluate the one case is probably wrong.
Do you have any opinions on, and again, this is something that the president is wrestling with and has to wrestle with, is when we make the call to go back to life as we know it, because there are all kinds of issues. When you coop people up for too long and you keep kids out of school for too long and jobs being sacrificed and businesses tottering, these are realistic things that have to be taken into account, when we're dealing with when to make the decision to let people start filtering back into their real lives. We have the mainstream media who wants to, in my opinion, destroy the president. They're all about they appear to just want to make it sound like until we get this to some expert out there saying only one person in the country is going to die from this, nobody can ever go back to work again. And these characters who control the mainstream media and many of these politicians who've never lived in the real world don't seem to have any sense whatsoever that we also need to keep America going. Do you have thoughts on this?
I have thoughts, but my thoughts, I work with individuals more. I'm not a policy guy. I can tell you this, having worked with people, I do believe that we need, and what I see is not only the consequences of illness, regardless whether it's this illness or it's some other illness, whether it's chronic kidney disease or lung disease or alcoholism. There's a huge economic and social impact on those diseases, just like there are this one. And it's a mistake to only look at treating the disease. And that's as a physician. I can't tell you policy, but I can tell you if I have a patient who has an illness, I think about my options I'm giving them and how it's going to affect them socially, as well as how it's going to affect them economically and other ways, because that's their life. I can't say how the state or the federal government should tell people what they're going to do. But I can tell you as a treating physician, you do need to look at the whole person and not just the disease state. Yeah. And I think that should apply to national politics and state politics and regulations? Yes. And I think that having somebody as brilliant as Tony Fauci in there to put in the piece of the medical is great, but we need people putting in the financial and the sociological aspects of this as well. And then leadership looking at all of those principles and not just one.
Okay, so in other words, you have to take into account everything.
I do as a treating physician, and I think other people would be wise to do the same.
And I take it, other treating physicians that look at the whole picture as well. You have to make a determination when your patient can go back to work, for example.
Right. Exactly, and it may be better for them they might be chancing something, but I've had patients who have said it is critical that I show up for work tomorrow when I know another day's rest might be a better thing to do. And you have to sit there and you tell them, you make the decision with the patient. And I think at the policy level, I think that the people making policy are going to have a discussion with the American people and do the same thing. I do it on a one-to-one basis, which is a little bit easier. I don't do what you're trying to do what the president's trying to do.
It's hard to have that discussion when the president's trying to do that discussion, have that discussion with the American people, and then flashing across the screen is some bonehead from CNN saying, the president doesn't care if people die or something. It's so difficult to have that discussion in this day and age, but that's politics in the modern age.
It is.
So here's a question for you. One of your patients calls you up. They say, Dr. Schaack, I've been coughing and I've got a little fever. What do I do? I'm freaking out that I have this. What do you say to that patient?
My disclaimer is this is a hypothetical. I think it's a law term. So you got to be careful in these things. First of all, I got to know, is that person have other medical problems?
Right.
As I would with any illness that they have. They call me up and said they have headaches. I got to know if they're hypertensive. I got to know other medical problems. With this one, I want to know the same thing. After taking all that, if this person seems to be a healthy person who currently is not short of breath and doesn't have concomitant illnesses, I'm going to tell that person, stay at home, try to isolate yourself even more from other people. If there's a room in the house where you can be and the rest of the family is not there, stay in that room predominantly. Don't interact as best you can. In today's world, we probably can start to get testing. A week ago, that wasn't true. We just told them to hang in there, and I did that. I had a patient that sat in a room for 10 days by herself while the rest of the family was in the rest of the house, who the test came back as negative.
Good.
And she didn't need it. But yes, I would look at that person, and I would talk to them about treatment options. I'm not saying I would treat every single one of them, but I would absolutely talk to them about treatment options, because I think some of these options are safe enough to be considered by some people who would want to consider them.
Isn't it true, at least this is what I'm hearing, that most people who get this virus, if they stay home and take care of themselves, they can get over it on their own? The
number I've heard, and I'm not, as I said, I don't have a personal thing from this, but I do look up, I don't treat a lot of many diseases. I go to literature. The 80% are going to do just fine number was sort of stuck in there early on, and it seems to still be there. That leaves 20% of a lot of people. So then you got to figure out them. The 80% is sort of easy. You call them every day, or you have your staff call them every day, and if they're still doing well, they're in that 80% you don't need to worry about. The bigger number that has actually been changing is, what is the death rate? Is it 4%, 5%, maybe 8% that they saw in China? Or is it closer to 1%, maybe 0.7%? The magic number we all seem to be able to live with is influenza, which is 0.1%. But that's a disease we've had a long time to learn about. We vaccinate half the population. We can treat it with medications. So to think that the native influenza is actually 0.1 is probably not true. It's probably greater than that. And there is word coming out that this may be as bad as a bad influenza bug, but not a lot worse. And you're right. The answer to your question is yes. Nobody has said the majority aren't going to get better on their own.
Are we ready for some questions?
Yeah, we'd love some questions. David?
I'm looking through them right now.
Okay, we're going to start going through some of your questions. As you can see, Dr. Schaack is fascinating, and Ronald Reagan was a lucky man. So was Jimmy Stewart to have you.
They were both great guys who I'm very proud to have served them.
Yeah. And
it was an interesting relationship, and obviously, especially with President Reagan, to go into a house that there's that degree of Secret Service. I dealt with them before and other patients, but never to quite to that degree.
Well, they must have kept their eyes on you.
It was.
David, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a question from Cameron.
Okay, Cameron, just say it loud, please.
Okay. So the question is the following. In Orange County, 28 cases of COVID-19 were reported today, in comparison to 85 cases on Saturday and higher numbers in the days prior. Could this simply be a good day or an indication of a decreasing trend overall?
Of course, either of those are possible, but the things that might influence that are, number one, weekends tend to be underreported in everything. Okay, people tend, even in today's climate, some people are going to wait till Monday to call their doctor and to do things. But those are certainly I guarantee you, if it was the other way around, you'd have people screaming and their hair on fire because the numbers were going up. So when you do get a number going down, you got to look at it and say, maybe that's a real thing. Yeah. The other issue is how they're counting positives. And the whole issue of how to count a positive is difficult right now. It's sad to say, but I think if we look at death rates, although there's a lag between diagnosis and death rates are probably ultimately going to be a better thing to look at when you're talking about this early time frame, where the decision whether something's diagnosed positive, is it a test positive? Is it 5 criteria? Is it a CAT scan? We don't really know what a positive case is right now, but that you can't take that number as a bad number no matter what.
David, got another one?
Yes.
Say it loud, please, so we can all hear you.
Yeah, give me one. Okay. Here's one question. And this is from Barbara Keller.
Barbara Keller. Barbara, how you doing? What's the question, David?
Can you get the virus from an infected person's cigarette smoke or vape smoke? So the question
Boy, that's
is
a great question.
The question is, would the virus flow?
It's a great
through
question,
smoke?
Barbara Keller. Thanks for joining us, by the way.
That's a very good question. We do know that and we're getting a lot of our information from influenza. Influenza likes certain things and moisture and things like that. I think I have not seen any data on that, but my most likely answer would be very unlikely. Although vape is aerosolized, they use moisture sometimes to aerosolize it. I can tell you this. I have people who are vapors who are worried about coronavirus. If you want to do something to really help yourself, quit vaping and forget about the coronavirus. No offense. It's a much bigger problem than vaping. And that's not an anti-smoking, that's an anti-vaping comment. But do you worry about any of it? Yes.
You say vaping, I guess it's common sense. Vaping can't possibly help you avoid, it has to lower your immunity or something.
It absolutely, it's not good for your lungs, we know. And but the question was, does the moisture or does the smoke that you can so clearly see, does it carry virus? I've not seen anything to suggest it. It certainly might to some degree, but the better thing is, I like the question that it lets people know when somebody just breathes out that their breath is what that vaping is showing, and that's why you need the social distancing. Because you notice it takes about 6 feet for that to dissipate to the point you don't see it. Yeah. So I think that's a great question in that it emphasizes that merely normal breathing expands a lot of what was in your lung to the people around you.
David?
Next question. And Eric, you're going to want to tune in on this one too.
Who's this from?
We keep scrolling down. Okay. Valerie Kennedy.
Valerie Kennedy. Thanks for joining in, Valerie.
How bad can the virus get for the homeless in the district?
That's something I'm going to be talking about, Valerie Kennedy. But we'll let, I haven't discussed this with the doctor. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say, but I definitely will have some comments on that.
Regardless of where you sit about the homeless, we know they're one of the most vulnerable aspects of our society. And being a homeless, I'm not sure it makes the current list for immunocompromised, but they're almost all immunocompromised, without a question. These people, if they do get this, they're going to get bad cases of it. And because many of the homeless don't follow the rules that many of us try to follow, for any reason you can say, I'm not sure they're going to be as good at the 6 feet difference. They're not going to be good at maintaining that. And you see, we all see it now, no matter where you live, there are 3 and 4 people cramped into a tent the size of a bathroom at best.
And Valerie, I will come back to that after the doctor finishes speaking.
I just want to say,
some serious concerns.
It is a sad, sad state, and this is just going to make it worse. And I don't have an answer for the homeless, but I do have an answer that they will be in a particularly endangered part of our society from this illness.
David?
Yeah. From Deborah, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the last name, I believe it's Crastil.
How do you spell it?
Crastil.
Deborah Crastil. Deborah, thanks for joining, and David's about to read your question.
The question is, do you think everybody should be tested? If someone does not have symptoms, visited China, or no exposure, should they still be tested?
Good question.
It's a great, the issue is really to what purpose? If you want to satisfy the epidemiologist in the world, yes, they would love to have everybody tested and that information be spread out. The question is, do we need to test everybody? Probably certainly not. In most illnesses, you test populations. You decide that I want to go out and measure 100,000 people. I'm going to get so many old people, so many young people, so many sick people. And you test that group and you expand it to the entire population. That's to understand the virus.
Well, let me
if you want to know treatment.
Yeah. I mean, shouldn't the only people that are tested pass certain muster? For example, I've heard already from what you've said so far, you're not calling for every single person that calls you up with a concern to go out and get tested.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that you're waiting to hear before you suggest to somebody you should get tested?
Okay, that's a much simpler question, and that one I can answer. If somebody has fever, cough, generalized body ache or fatigue, or a combination of those, I would try to get them tested in today's world. I couldn't do that a week ago, but in today's world, I think I can get those people tested.
So there you go, Val. There you go. Who asked that question?
Valerie.
No. Crystal. Deborah. Sorry, Deborah. The doctor said if you have fever, a cough, generalized body aches, that's when he thinks somebody should be tested. Other than that, he does not believe everybody should be tested. Is that fair?
Except for epidemiological studies, which is, I don't think she was asking. But
no, that's a whole other thing.
You listen to the news.
That's for scientists
they confuse
to do.
them. They confuse them, and that's my problem. The news will sometimes confuse them.
Well, I've got my own issues on the news, but you're a doctor.
I've heard that.
I'm a political type.
Rush Yakman.
Rush Yakman, how you doing, buddy?
And the question is, what is the lifespan of the virus on surfaces?
Do you know the answer to that?
It depends on what surface it is, and they're working that out. It's probably from hours to possibly days.
That
and it's
blows me
a
away when
hard
I hear
surface versus a moisturized surface. Temperature, a lot of things affect it, and so it depends on the surface. Unfortunately, it is not that it dies within a half minute or anything like that. It's longer than that, we know.
How can something last for hours on a hard surface?
We do.
Well, but where it just blows my mind when I hear that.
Bacteria. It's not surprising to me.
Okay.
I think a lot of people would find it surprising. It's not surprising to me. If you look at, if we take this hard surface and we swipe it for bacteria, many people when they were in high school did a little test where they got a petri dish, and they just swiped a desk and did it, and it grew like crazy. So there's stuff all around us all the time. Viruses find a harder time than bacteria because they need bacteria they need a living cell to live in. Viruses can't replicate on their own. Yeah. So they have to sit there and not replicate and survive, and that's tough.
David?
Yeah, I'm going to...
Thanks for that question, Rush.
These are great, and I wish I had better definitive answers, but we don't. But we're starting to get better, and we can narrow them down if people are willing to accept some generality to these.
Okay.
What do you got, David?
Another question, I'm going to reword it.
Who's this
Dory
from?
Berry.
Who's this from?
Dory Berry.
Dory Berry. Dory, thanks so much for joining me.
Dory is basically asking, can you please put the COVID-19 in comparison to the flu season?
So let me just say that loud in case you haven't heard it. Dory asked the doctor to compare COVID-19 and what we're seeing to a normal flu season. Thanks for that question, Dory.
Very good. And the difficulty in answering that, if you look at how it is today, LA County has officially, as of last week, decided that the flu season's officially over. Now, the influenza season is defined as being over when they do random cultures on people and less than 5% of the people have it. But you got to realize that less than 5% of the people have COVID-19 right now.
Let me ask the question a bit of a different way. And you probably know these numbers, but I've been looking online and stuff. And I saw something just a little earlier today that said that last year, the number of people who died from the regular flu around the world, the total number was somewhere between 300,000 and 600,000. Does that sound?
That sounds right. And in the United States last year, was only about 30 or 32,000, but 2 years ago it was 60,000.
Okay.
Huge numbers.
So why, and this is probably more an issue for politicians and others, and maybe not for a doctor, but why is there all of this going on right now? And this huge, everything that we're all living through, when we're living in a world where 300,000 to 600,000 die each year from the standard flu. Why are we living through this period where our lives are being so dramatically affected by something that, might have a far lower number?
Your word might, and I think will have a lower number.
Yeah.
But the early modeling several weeks ago, and it's only been several weeks ago, said that the number could be in the 10s to 20 million range. I think now people are no longer talking about that range at all,
right.
But decisions had to be made on imperfect data. We all do that all the times in our lives.
Yeah.
We don't have enough data, and I think that
right.
it's going to be very interesting to see retrospectively. I don't think the same decisions would be made today back then if we knew what we knew today. I can't say that for sure, but I find it would be hard to listen to the numbers of 100 to 200,000 deaths and this type of response. The other thing we're starting to realize is a clustering effect that's occurring. New York has a very different problem than a small town in Montana. Yeah. And how we should treat it, we're learning. Yeah. And it takes time to learn.
Yeah. David?
I guess this is a question for Eric from Jeremy Zeth D. Gook. Jeremy's question is, any thoughts on mandatory vaccinations for future potential pandemics?
Jeremy, thanks for asking that question. Well, let me turn that on. I think the doctor should answer that question. What do you think, Doc? Any thoughts on mandatory vaccinations for future pandemics? I will start by saying that I believe that we have to have, and I've said this the other day, and this is more of a political, non-medical issue, but I believe we have to have an extra branch of our military that just focuses on protecting us from future viruses, because we all now know, and all of our enemies now know, how, and they probably knew this beforehand, but we're learning for the first time, so many of us, how dangerous these kind of things are, and how you can so damage an economy and a nation in all the ways that we're watching, how these pandemics can do it. You've got these evildoers out there all over the globe who probably in their secret labs, these North Koreans, these Chinese, these Russians, the mullahs in Iran, they're probably out there, creating the next virus. And we have to be armed, ready. We have to have an arm of the military, the best and brightest scientists, doctors. We have to have intelligence resources on board who are looking right into these labs in North Korea to see what they're creating right now. And we have to be developing. We have to be ready for them to come, and we have to be developed and know when they start getting unleashed. We can't rely on the Chinas of the world, obviously, to tell us when something gets unleashed. And we have to be ready immediately to destroy that virus in its infancy. So, these are my initial thoughts on how we do this in the future, but we have to treat it, right now in this day and age, from what we've all now learned, these evildoers, they don't have to focus on nuclear, destroying us with nuclear. They can focus on destroying their enemies with these these microscopic organisms. And we have to be ready to deal with them from here going forward, and I like to think we will be. But I'm sorry, Doctor, what do you think?
No, I think that you took one piece of it, and that leaves me the other piece, which is an easier one to answer. So this would not involve intentionally targeting a population. As far as mandating them, that's a personal belief. But what I can tell you is that if you look at healthcare, we've not had to mandate to eliminate disease in the past for non-military aggressors. We have gotten rid of smallpox without mandating it. It was never mandated in this country. there were parts of the world that it probably was, but in this country it was not, and we got rid of smallpox. Polio, we by and large got rid of without mandating it. And then if you look at the
Without
measles,
without mandating.
obligate vaccination.
Right.
That as long as you got large enough herd immunity, and there's enough, in my view, reasonably thinking people who allow themselves to be vaccinated, and you're talking to a guy who got polio from the polio vaccine when I was little, because that was a live attenuated vaccine, which is why I don't play professional basketball right now, is what I blame it on. But we have been able to get enough, in my mind, again, reasonable people to get vaccinated that we probably, except in an attack setting, which is, I let you answer, in a non-attack setting, we probably can get enough reasonable people to vaccinate willingly that mandatory vaccines hopefully won't be necessary, because that takes away a lot of freedom.
Freedom's, liberty and freedom's big issues for us. Got another, that was a great question. You got other questions, David? Any others right now?
Looking through them now, but I don't see any new ones.
Okay.
There's one that you might like. It's a follow-up of the question I just asked. It says, any additional comments on censorship of vaccine information, such as what Adam Schiff pushed into effort to silence open discussion on the issue?
Listen, the question was, who asked that question, David?
This is, again, where is it? Jeremy.
Jeremy. And the question was, any further thoughts
Basically asking you
on
how do you feel about Adam Schiff trying to censor like the information behind possible vaccines?
So Jeremy asked, what do I think about Adam Schiff trying to censor information on vaccines? Listen, Adam Schiff is a Stalinist at heart. He wants the government to tell us what to do, what to think, how to act, what to say, what not to say. He wants to spy, let the government spy right into all of our lives, whether we're innocent or non-innocent. I've said this last time. I mean, Adam Schiff is a danger to the nation. I think there's something sick in the guy's head, and he is the last guy that should be telling us what to do, what to say, what to think, how we should decide personally about vaccinating and not vaccinating. And certainly he should not have the powers he has over the FISA court right now, which is the outfit that, as many of you know, allows the FBI to just go into a court without anybody else there and try and seek permission to spy on innocent Americans. Schiff has not changed those rules at all. I have many thoughts on that. We have to be able to punish, for example, government actors who intentionally abuse the FISA process to spy on innocent Americans. So I believe he's a Stalinist at heart. So Jeremy, going to your question, I have a real problem with how he's trying to completely stifle and smother debate on vaccinations. Any other questions right now, David?
Another good question from Cameron.
Cameron.
Back.
Should the United States put sanctions on China for not putting this virus under control?
Oh, that's not a question for a doctor. I mean, I don't know, maybe doctor.
No,
I've got a lot of thoughts on that too, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I will tell you something. Chinese American people, every Chinese American I ever met, some of my closest friends. But as far as that Chinese government, I got some serious problems with them, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, anything else right now for the good doctor? All right.
Not really.
All right, Dr. Schaack, you're amazing. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, just
Okay.
listen, do reasonable things. I have a little mantra I started, and I don't know what's going to go, and that is, these times do not require extreme measures. They require extreme diligence to routine measures. And if you'll do that, most of us will do better.
Okay.
And I truly believe that. So
Okay.
thank you so much for having me.
I'm not going to shake your hand.
No, we're not going to do that. We can keep our 6
Can
feet
you
here.
fist bump?
and
Are you
we'll go
allowed to do
No,
this?
we're not even allowed to do that.
No fist
supposedly.
bumping.
So we'll end it. We can do it here. Yes.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
And I'm going to
Thanks so much.
continue now
Let
with
you
some
finish
thoughts on more of the political issues. So please stay tuned.
And thank you for your help.
Bye, Dr.
Okay.
Schaack. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
And we'll have Dr. Schaack back another day as this continues. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Doctor.
so much.
Okay. Thank you. Amazing listening to the doctor. The good doctor answers some great questions. So,
Can I?
yeah, what you got,
interject?
Dave?
This is from Fernando. Good comment.
Fernando's got a comment. David, what is it? Fernando, thanks for joining in as usual.
Eric, you are probably the only sane Republican running for office in California, let alone in Los Angeles since Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Fernando, you're amazing. I really, really appreciate that comment. That means a great deal to me, and you've told me a lot of things along the way, and so thank you for that. That means more to me than you can imagine. It was great having the doctor. It's great talking to everybody. I'm going to switch off COVID-19 for the time being now. I mean, it's huge. It's obvious. It's a part of our life right now. But I got a few other things to talk about. I'm going to talk about two things, maybe three things in particular. I'm going to say a few words about how these people that we're fighting, how they're politicizing everything under the sun. They politicize this terrible virus that we're dealing with now. I'm going to talk about homelessness a little bit more in the day and age of COVID-19. I might address AB5 a little bit, and then we'll wrap it up. And first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining me and listening in today. And David, feel free to jump in with questions somebody might have. Okay. This is my message to Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, the CNNs of the world, this outfit that calls itself the LA Times. Stop politicizing this virus. People are living in very difficult times because of this virus. People are dying. People are living in fear. People are doing whatever they can to get through this. I know for a fact we'll get through this. But to have to read some moron's headline on CNN this morning about Nancy Pelosi saying that President Trump is fiddling while people die, that is a purely politicized statement from Nancy Pelosi. That's what the Schiffs of the world are doing. Just read some of his tweets if you can stomach it. That's what the Pelosi's of the world are doing. That's what these mainstream media types are doing. They are totally positioning everything they say purely to try and defeat President Trump in the next election. They're not doing anything that I could see to actually help the people. And from what I see a president who's working day and night with a stellar team doing everything humanly possible to help all of us. So, and along these lines, this CNN, whoever writes the headlines on CNN.com, it's time to find out the name of this person. It's time to find out, I guarantee you that person has never voted for a Republican in their life. And there is no doubt the person who writes not only the headlines on CNN, CNN.com, or the person that puts the words along the bottom of the screen when somebody's talking on CNN.com, this is either one of, or there's perhaps a small group of them. These are some of the most disingenuous, misleading people we have ever seen. They clearly come to their jobs with an agenda, which is we have to do anything possible to make sure President Trump does not get reelected. They approach their jobs with that agenda, and every single way they take information that is available to all of us, manipulate it, pull out little bits and pieces, and reframe things to make it look like every single thing President Trump says or does or doesn't do, or every single thing a Republican says or doesn't do is some kind of terrible thing. Stop. All they are doing is politicizing this virus. Start writing about things that can help people, okay? Help people get better. Help us, all of us, get through this. And stop coming to work every day with one thing in mind, and with just trying to do one thing, which is destroy an American president. We've seen you do it now for 3 years on every subject possible. Stop doing it. We have people in need. These are very difficult times for our country. Nancy Pelosi, if you have nothing to say to help Americans, and by the way, throwing in things into this massive aid package, which was just passed, like, requiring jet engines to be green jet engines, and, requiring early voting and all kinds of other crazy stuff, had nothing to do with this bill. If you can't help the people, just shut up, sit down, and let people like this stellar team and our president, who are working together to help the people, just let us help the people. And I say that also to that, whoever that person is at CNN, Mr. Schiff, you have no ability to do anything but try and criticize the president. Stop politicizing it. And I'll say one other thing to both Schiff and Pelosi while I'm saying this. You might want to look at today's San Francisco Chronicle. Somebody sent me this article earlier in the day, and the story was that California has had 21 million N95 masks stockpiled for years. 21 million of these masks that are so critically needed by our nation and by the world right now. They've been stockpiled, and what the San Francisco Chronicle said this morning was that all of them expired years ago. They expired years ago. So Ms. Pelosi, Mr. Schiff, you might want to find out why you let these expire. You might want to talk to Mr. Newsom about it. You might want to talk to Jerry Brown about it. You might want to talk to the supermajority of Democrats who've been controlling our state legislature for years and years. You might want to talk to yourselves about it and wonder why you let 21 million N95 masks go expired. I understand from at least the article that the reason they expired is because the elastic strap that hold the mask to the face, they may not be tight enough now because the elastic straps might have loosened. The masks themselves are supposedly good. So I hope that you, Ms. Pelosi, who care so much about the health and safety of our great American people, and you, Mr. Schiff, who supposedly cares so much for everybody's health and safety, and the rest of them, I hope you've all arranged with an elastic factory or some sort of factory, rubber band factory, something to start replacing the elastic holders on these masks, so that we could get these 21 million N95 masks on board right away. But stop trying to destroy a president based on this. Couple other things that I'll talk about. And let me say hi to a few folks here. Valerie, thanks so much for coming in. Deborah, great seeing you. Dory.
Michelle.
Great seeing you. Michelle, it's always great seeing you on here. Fernando, I really appreciate everybody joining in. Cameron, great seeing you. Now, Cameron had asked a question a little bit before about should we sanction the Chinese government. And this is what I'll say my thoughts are on that. I am very concerned that that this was an intentional effort by the Chinese government to sabotage the economies, at least the economies, and certainly the people of many other countries in the world. I'm very concerned about it, and I firmly believe, not based on any inside information, but I'm sure that our government right now is looking into what it can find out about what happened, when it happened, how it happened. And if we could find any information that this was more than just some random virus, coming out of a food market or something and spreading, then we have to keep all our options open with respect to sanctions for the Chinese government or whatever else we do. Because if this was, in fact, a tacit act of war, we have to deal with that. I'm not saying go to actual war with the Chinese, but we have to deal with it. And I'll tell you something, my mind is not certainly made up about what happened. There seem to be too many indicators that that there might have been some intentional wrongdoing here by the Chinese government, not by the good people of China, the people, not by the great Chinese Americans at all. Their government is a totalitarian government. It controls the people of that nation. This is purely on the Chinese government. This all started coming out apparently right after President Trump entered into a great deal for the United States with the Chinese government. And next thing you know, a virus starts coming out of nowhere. So that's my quick answer to your question, Cameron. Susan, thanks for joining in. A. Rush, great seeing you again. Joyce, Adam Schiff needs to be removed. He does. He really does. You know, we have an uphill battle against him. This is a tough district, but Adam Schiff is vulnerable. He is now vulnerable because for the last 3 years, people have seen him for what he really is, and you all know just as well as I know what a bad, dangerous, delusional, lying piece of you-know-what that guy is. And I will tell you something. He has not had an opponent like me in 20-plus years since he ran against a great congressman, Jim Rogan. Since that time, he hasn't run into anything like me. Mr. Schiff, I'm going to say it here. I'm going to say it now. I know that you have people watching me, and I'll say it again. Let's debate, man. Let's do it. I'll debate you early and often. I'll debate you starting next week. I'll debate you once a month, once a week, once a day. Let's start debating. Let's let the people see you for who you really are, and they'll see me for who I really am, and let's let the people of all political persuasions make that decision. Because yes, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, but you know, I know lots of no party preference people. I live in Los Angeles. I know lots of Democrats who are my friends. We may not see eye to eye at all politically, but you know what? I talk to everybody. And it's time that we have a debate, an open debate in this district, Mr. Schiff, one-on-one. Let all the people watch in, and let's let everybody see you in action for what you really are, and not just as some, you know, bozo sitting there on the clown of like a Chuck Todd set, you know, Meet the Press, where the guy just loves throwing you softballs. So hopefully we'll get that debate going. I'm sure we will. I'll tell you, that's one of the most exciting things for me, everybody, is getting into what I call round two here. Is I know I'm going to get to debate Schiff at some point in time, and I cannot wait. So let me talk a little bit about homelessness. Valerie Kennedy, you asked that question before. I talk about homelessness a lot. It's a huge issue for me. I've got a plan that I've not heard anybody out here talking about. And one of the things I say in that plan, I've been saying it now for a long time, is that we have to, and this is way before COVID-19, we have to immediately get the homeless off the streets. But especially now, in this day and age of COVID-19, you know, you don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a psychiatrist. You don't have to be a politician. Don't have to be a lawyer. Don't have to be anything to know that if, God forbid, one of these folks in these homeless encampments gets this virus, it's going to spread like wildfire. We've all seen it. We drive by the homeless encampments. You see those tents lined up. People are living on top of each other. There's no social distancing going on in those homeless encampments. These people have health issues, many of them to begin with. They have compromised immune systems, many of them to begin with. God forbid this disease or this virus enters into one of those homeless encampments. Everybody in that homeless encampment will have it instantly. It'll start spreading around the city like wildfire. We've got to get these people off the streets immediately. This Governor Gavin Newsom, this Mayor Eric Garcetti, they've been talking now for years about getting the homeless off the streets. Nothing has changed for years. They talk about it every other day. We can, right now we're in a health emergency that gives the government all kinds of powers. You see what they're doing with our lives with those powers. And I have some questions about what they're doing in our lives, quite frankly. Not everything they're doing, but with some things. But they have the power right now to have law enforcement remove these people from the streets. And even before there was this virus and this health crisis that we're living through now, government, following the plan that I've talked about that was used in Utah called Project Rio Grande, even with the existing laws that say people can live on the streets if they want to, has the power to immediately remove these people off the streets. We have plenty of vacant federal and state land. Many of them have vacant structures on them. Those structures can be being spruced up as we speak, and we can immediately start putting these people in these structures. I don't see anybody being taken off the streets by our governor or by our mayor. What are you waiting for? Yeah, a lot of these people are not going to want to be removed from the streets. That's got to be our decision. Okay, we got to do it. It's for the safety not only of those people, because there's nothing compassionate, Mr. Garcetti, for example, of having people live and die on our streets. I know you call them our homeless neighbors. There's nothing compassionate about letting people live and die on the streets. But when we're living in a day and age of COVID-19, where everybody's got to be off the streets, where people have to do social distancing, we have to get the homeless off the streets immediately. We don't want to live through the nightmare of this kind of virus spreading through our homeless encampments and then spreading to all of us. Got to do it. Stop the delay. This should have been started weeks ago. Start it immediately. Stop just talking about it, Governor Newsom. Stop just talking about it, Mayor Garcetti. Let's do it. We've seen the powers you guys have with these orders that you've been issuing. When are we going to see an actual order that says time to remove the homeless from the streets? We're starting the policy tomorrow. Couple other things. There's this policy. It's going to be an issue in my campaign. It's called AB 5. Lots of people work as independent contractors. Lots of people in the entertainment industry in our district here work as independent contractors. Truckers work as independent contractors. Many nurses and other healthcare providers work as independent contractors. Musicians work as independent contractors. We live in a state now where the Democrat political machine has the temerity to pass a law now that says that we're not allowed to have, with very limited exceptions, you're not allowed to work as an independent contractor anymore. It's started to destroy businesses. There was a classical, for example, an event going on that goes on every summer up in the I think up in a nice, beautiful part of California. Classical event. It draws in people from all around the state and the country. That's had to be canceled because all the people, all the musicians were independent contractors. That is destroying businesses as well. That's destroying people's livelihoods. This is an issue that cuts across all political persuasions. Many Democrats, for example, work as independent contractors. And it's an issue for me as somebody running for Congress, because now these same goons, these same creeps, these same socialists who are trying to take over our country are trying to turn this into a national law. Adam Schiff, of course, has not said a darn word about it, which means he likely supports it. We need somebody like me in the federal government to make sure that thing never becomes law, that terrible law. So I just want to say in closing, Barry, thanks for coming in, buddy. Let me just see, Barry, you're just going right down, you just left my screen. What's Barry Baxter's? Okay, I can't see your question, Barry. I just want to say in closing, because I've gone on for a while, America is the greatest country God ever created. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe we are the shining city on a hill. There is no doubt in my mind that we're going to beat this virus. We're going to kill this virus. We're going to win this battle, this war against this silent enemy. You know, we won World War II. We beat back the polio epidemic, where people were waking up paralyzed on a daily basis. We got through the Great Depression. We got off our feet on 9/11, rebuilt this country. We won the Cold War. All right. We've gotten through everything that's ever been put in front of us stronger than ever before. We're a nation of people who came from all parts of the planet, who came from hardships, who battled hardships, who battled famines, who battled wars, who came across oceans with nothing in their pocket, who tamed the Wild West, who built this incredible country. Nothing has ever gotten down Americans before. We are the hardiest people this world has ever created, because look at our ancestors. Look at all of our ancestors, what they went through to come to this great shining city on a hill, to build a better life for their families and for all of us. So this COVID-19, yeah, we're in a battle right now. We're going to win this thing. I have no doubt we're going to win this thing. You heard what the good doctor said. He was saying very positive things, how we're going to beat this. We're living through tough times right now, having to watch what this has done to all of our worlds. It's you know, I don't think any one of us will ever go into a supermarket again and walk down a full aisle of canned goods or a full aisle of toilet paper and ever take that for granted again. We will get through this. We will be better for it. Our nation will be even stronger for it. So what I would say is just stay strong. Stay the course, stay vigilant, keep the faith, avoid fear. We will get through this. We will get our jobs back. We'll get our businesses back. I know so many of you are living through tough times and fears right now. I have no doubt. I know in my bones we're going to get through this and get through it better than ever. I want to thank our great president, because he's clearly working day and night with his team, his stellar team, to help all of us. You know, I'm in this race. I guess you could boil it down to I'm fighting. I believe we're in a battle of good versus evil in this country right now. I know that socialism and communism are inherently evil. I'm here fighting against this socialist, communist, creeping takeover that we're watching through the Democrat Party in our country. It used to be in the background. Now it's in the foreground with these psychotic squad members. That AOC is nuts. If you saw her on TV the other day waving her arms like this, talking, she is insane. She has no idea of history. She needs to be sent back into the dustbin of history. So does this Ilhan Omar. So does Rashida Tlaib. So does this Adam Schiff, who has never said a word about any of those people that I just said. Every time they open their mouth and the filth and venom that comes out of their mouth, this Adam Schiff runs in a corner and hides under a rock. Note that he has basically vanished for the last, I don't know, month or so. Schiff has been in hiding. You know, this is the way these politicians work. They do their dirty work and then they try and disappear for long enough before election. They think everybody's going to forget about their dirty work. I'm not going to let anybody forget about what Mr. Schiff did to all of us for the last 3 years. So we're fighting for God and country. I love all of you. And we're going to be just fine. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me here again tonight. Keep an eye on all of our Facebook and our Instagram and our press releases, and I can't wait to be able to meet as many of you as possible once all of this stuff is lifted. So thanks again, and talk to you again soon.